I'm Vinnie Politan. The subject of my investigation, the shooting death of Judge Kevin Mullins by Sheriff Mickey Stines in Kentucky. It's a multi-layered story involving inmates being extorted for sex and a sheriff feeling the pressure from a related civil rights lawsuit. Here's the story. It started as a scandal. Whispers of corruption, abuse of power, and a courthouse tainted by dark secrets. But on September 19th, 2024, it turned into something far deadlier. Inside the Letcher County Courthouse in Whitesburg, Kentucky, former Deputy Ben Fields had been coercing women on home incarceration into trading sexual favors as payment for ankle monitors. Fields was criminally convicted, but then a civil suit named the Sheriff Mickey Stines. He was deposed, and just days later, violence erupted in the judge's chambers. The courthouse hall suddenly echoed with gunfire. Stines pulled the trigger again and again, leaving District Judge Kevin Mullins lifeless on the floor. A judge executed, a sheriff accused, a county in shock. But why did the sheriff do it? Was he afraid? Was he paranoid, or was he full of rage? That's a question a jury in Letcher County, Kentucky will have to decide. Peeling back the layers, trying to understand why is what this story is about. It's what the investigation is about, and it's what the trial will be about. So one of the things going on, as you heard, was a civil lawsuit. And this is all connected to that sextortion scandal inside the judge's chambers, where one of Mickey Stines, who was the sheriff, one of his deputies, was criminally convicted. Now, he was named in this civil lawsuit. And part of the civil lawsuit, when you get sued, you get deposed, which means the other side sits you down and asks you some tough questions, trying to get information from you relative to what is alleged in the lawsuit. So just a few days before the shooting, the sheriff was deposed. We have the transcripts of that deposition, and what I want to do for you is we had a couple of our producers reading the question and answer during that parts of that deposition, and I want you to take a listen to it right now.
So they told you that Ben had been fooling around with Brianna Cornett and told you that Stacey Yates had reported that there had been some sort of fooling around between Ben Fields and Sabrina Atkins. Did I understand that correctly?
Yes.
What about Judge Mullins? Do you think that he was aware? Did they tell you?
No, they didn't tell me. So at the time that all this started happening, I was tore up and having a bad episode, you know? So my memory is fogged.
You said that you talked to Judge Mullins. What did you and Judge Mullins talk about?
I told him that a lawsuit and stuff had been filed.
Did he not already know that?
I don't know.
Okay, well, was it your impression when you spoke to him that he was aware of that or was not aware of that prior to your conversation?
I can't recall.
Okay, so what all did you tell him?
I can't recall our conversation.
Aside from that conversation that you had with Judge Mullins on February 1st of 2022, have you had any other conversations with Judge Mullins about Ben Fields and these allegations about sexual misconduct?
I can't recall. Me and him was meeting in the office, and I told him about the allegations that was made with Sabrina.
Right.
I think he just sat there.
Just so we are clear, you are describing the conversation that happened on January 31st at 1845.
Yes, I'm pretty sure. And then I get up and say I got to have your gun and badge, and I said, there are others. And he said, who? And I said, Brianna. And then he leaves.
You can almost feel, just by reading it, you can sense there's a lot of tension in the air, and there is oftentimes in civil lawsuits, especially when one of the parties is being deposed. But this was a big deal, a big story, and a big scandal in a small town. And this deposition is taking place just before the sheriff shoots and kills the judge that he's talking about in that deposition. Which brings us to the first question in our investigation. What happened during the deposition? What was the questioning about? What was the demeanor of the sheriff? What was the atmosphere like inside that room? Joining me, the attorney whose firm held that deposition and represents the woman suing, former Sheriff Sean Mickey Stines. Ned Pillersdorf is with us. Ned, thanks so much for joining us. Great to see you tonight. How much of the deposition was about the judge?
Some of it was. I mean, to put this in context, the lawsuit we filed was kind of a sweeping lawsuit. We basically alleged that there was a significant problem with the ankle bracelet program and that these women were being easily sextorted, if that's a word. One of the reasons we filed the lawsuit was we didn't think what happened to Miss Atkins and Miss Hill were isolated incidents, or Miss Cornett as well, that the reality is in Kentucky courts, lots of women are charged and they end up on ankle bracelets. Sometimes it's the only way we can keep them out of jail. And the lawsuit we filed basically alleged that this was a significant problem in the Letcher County Courthouse. Keep in mind the defendant, Fields, who eventually pled guilty, was not only running the ankle bracelet program, he was also a bailiff and deputy sheriff. So the context of the lawsuit was we named Sheriff Stines in his official capacity because our position was he knew or should have known this was going on. And in fairness to Sheriff Stines and the defendants, basically Stines denied any knowledge. I mean, that's their side of the lawsuit. The lawsuit is still pending. But the context of the lawsuit was for us to ask Stines information we had learned during our investigation. He generally denied knowledge, which I think is fair. But what was interesting about the deposition, the part you just heard where your producers read the question and answers, that's not how it happened. He was very distracted, hesitant. I don't even want to, maybe saying he was in a daze is overstating, but to me, there was something going on there. It wasn't your typical civil rights deposition in which a sheriff who's used to answering questions, being in a courtroom setting, he would be asked perfunctory questions and it'd be these long silences. And while the deposition you read indicates, quick responses and questions and answers, that's not the reality of what happened at that deposition. My co-counsel conducted a deposition, and I came away thinking there's something going on here. Of course, we had no idea that 3 days later he'd killed the judge.
Right. And Ned, I want you to take a listen to Jeremy Bartley, who is Sheriff Stines' criminal defense attorney, talking about that deposition.
I think one of the big focal points for this particular case, and we've said this before, is the deposition. The deposition that that Mickey was giving in that particular case was scheduled for Monday, and this happened on a Thursday. So just a few days prior was this deposition, and I think in the week prior to and the week of the deposition, lots of people noticed that Mickey had become more increasingly paranoid, that he became sleepless, had gone nights without sleep, and there was an overwhelming amount of pressure on him, some internal, but we believe there were external pressures as well, because there were a lot of things that happened within these chambers that during a deposition could be potentially fair game for questions. And not only at that deposition, but if the civil case continued, then in further discovery in that case. And I think there was a lot of interest by those people who populated the judges' chambers for whatever reason about what Mickey might say in those depositions.
And it's interesting, he's talking about before, like a week before the deposition, and then after the deposition, this paranoia. Ned, I also want to put up one more piece from that deposition, because I think it's very pertinent to what Jeremy Bartley was just saying. And this is where Sheriff Stines says, slow down a little bit. And then your partner says, was there ever a time when you told Ben Fields that he wasn't allowed to use Sheriff's Department equipment or vehicle? The answer, I don't recall. I am having an episode, sorry. Was there any sort of a episodic breakdown during this deposition?
That transcript's accurate. And it was really consistent with his demeanor. And I don't know exactly how to describe it. The best way I could describe it, Vinnie, when shortly after Stines was arrested, he had this, for lack of a better word, bizarre arraignment before a district court judge. And the judge asked him simple, straight-ahead questions, and there were long pauses, and it was a strange situation. You know, here's a sheriff who's used to being in the courtroom. There's the video there, and the judge was asking him straight-ahead questions, and a couple times there was like no response. So, what was going on in his head? I guess it's open to wild speculation.
But what's interesting, Ned, is what's happening after all of this is the same thing from your perspective that is happening before. So whatever he was experiencing or whatever is going on with Sheriff Stines seemed to a certain extent continue as it manifested itself in his appearance and the way he was reacting and I guess communicating with people, whether it's a deposition or an arraignment.
You know, the deposition, there were not many gotcha explosive questions. My co-counsel was very reserved, asking very professional questions, trying to get information. And for suddenly him to announce he's having a panic attack, I don't know if befuddling is the right word. It was certainly strange. I've been involved in lots of depositions in civil rights cases with public officials. That's the first time we had to stop the deposition because the public official announced he was basically having a panic attack.
Wow.
There's something going on that I guess mental health professionals may help us try to explain one day. I just thought it was unusual, bizarre, and it certainly was a most atypical deposition, but he didn't really say much of substance.
Right, so it wasn't the substance of it, it was almost like just being in that position. Ned, stand by. We've got some more for you coming up in the program, but coming up next, what was the sheriff afraid of?
First thing he said to the investigators was, I'm concerned that they were going to take or have taken my wife and daughter.
See, that glove won't fit OJ, and if you don't ask him to try it on, I will.
Why do an experiment for the first time in front of a jury? It was utter incompetence.
We believe the glove was his.
It was a setup.
They weren't fitting it.
That was O.J. Simpson's best acting.
If it doesn't fit, you must acquit.
Trial and Error. Why did O.J. win? A Court TV original series. New episode Sunday night, 8 Eastern and Pacific. Only on Court TV.
But you saw the video of the judge. Any other videos that you actually saw?
No. They say that the Sheriff Mickey Stines is involved. I don't know.
Who said that?
Chad, he said he had videos with Mickey. Mickey used to do the same thing when he was over house arrest.
So this is one of the victims of this sextortion scandal, but talking about videos that may or may not exist involving the judge and Mickey Stines engaging in this conduct. She said she saw the judge doing it. She heard about Mickey Stines' involvement in all this. So, I mean, that's an interesting concept. Like, how big is this scandal? Well, no one else has been arrested. No one else has been charged. But is there more out there? I want you to the reason I'm asking that is she's trying to uncover or figure out what's going on with Sheriff Mickey Stines. Here's his attorney who spoke to us, Jeremy Bartley, talking about the statements that the sheriff makes immediately after shooting and killing Judge Mullins.
And one of the things that we've talked about from the beginning is the fact that the first thing he said to the investigators was, I'm concerned that they were going to take or have taken my wife and daughter. We believe that that Mickey believes strongly that his wife and daughter and family were in imminent danger. Now, we believe at the same time that the pressure and anxiety and other factors that I'm not going to discuss tonight, we'll leave that for another day, but we believe that his mental health had been impaired and certainly was accelerated due to this civil deposition.
All right, danger or afraid of exactly who doing exactly what? That brings us to the next question in our investigation. And it might be difficult to answer some of these because of what's going on in the sheriff's mind, but what was the sheriff afraid of? And whatever he's afraid of, is it based in reality or is it part of a paranoid delusion? Joining me, the host of Hillbilly Crime on YouTube. She has closely followed this case from the beginning. Elizabeth Jones is with us, and clinical and forensic neuropsychologist and author of the book, The New Rules of Attachment, Dr. Judy Ho. Great to have you both here. Elizabeth, let me ask you, what is the fear? Is it actual fear? Is there talk that his family was actually in danger?
Well, I have an evolving theory now. Ever since we read those depositions and I noticed that Daniel Dotson was there with Mickey in person as his personal representation, we went and tried to find an entry of appearance for him. And I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know, but I've been told that he would probably have to have one filed somewhere, and we can't find that. And I kind of just feel like there was a level of intimidation there when he was given his deposition. Someone babysitting him, making sure he didn't say the wrong thing.
That's fascinating. That's fascinating. So let me ask you, because his attorney kind of is talking about this, Dr. Judy Ho, talking about the reality of him being scared and there being some basis in reality for it, but he's also having some level of a breakdown at the same time. So how does that work? And is the fear, if there is some factual basis for it, does it get exaggerated? Does it get twisted? What happens if someone is, at the same time that there is something happening, like really happening, and they're also having a mental breakdown relative to it?
Right, Vinny. Well, when we're talking about persecutory delusions, it means that it's something that's not borne out completely to reality. So it can be something that is a complete departure from reality, or it can just be a significant exaggeration of something that's going on. That is still a delusion. So it sounds like maybe the attorney's argument is something akin to the fact that there could be some basis in reality for his fears that someone more group of people might be targeting his family, but that his reaction to it was so extreme and that it was such a persistent idea that got taken way out of context to what is happening in reality. If that is the case, then that is still a delusional disorder of some sort or some type of psychotic symptomatology.
Now, I want to focus in on the time just before the shooting. So they had lunch and before the shooting, but after lunch, take a listen to what Mickey Stines' attorney told me about what his client, the sheriff, was doing.
On the delivery, there was an incident where our client was asked to deliver to another place that was not the normal place where he did the deliveries for this particular individual. And the witness will testify that at this point he was very concerned that there was an attempt to isolate him and to cause him harm.
And here is the sheriff. This is after lunch, going on that ride, delivering meals. But as Jeremy Bartley said there, he felt like he was going somewhere where he normally didn't go and was being isolated and again, sensing some level of fear. Elizabeth Jones, he's not alone on that trip, right? He's with someone, and that person has spoken out about that as well.
Well, you also have to remember that that is the boy who was sitting in the window in the judge's chambers. So that's who's riding with him in that truck delivering those meals, is that same boy.
And going like out of the path, do we know anything about what was going on? What happened on that ride, Elizabeth?
Well, I don't know anything other than what Mickey's lawyer said, but I found that very interesting that he felt like he was being lured somewhere. So if we kind of look at all the different kinds of really bad conducts on behalf of more than one person in that courthouse, if you can just imagine Mickey knowing and being aware for the last 15 years of all of these bad acts going on by several different people, you know, you could see how that would make him maybe a little bit more paranoid than
and that
average person.
Yeah, and that seems to be exactly what his lawyer is saying, that there's some basis in reality, but he's also feeling all the pressure. Okay, both our guests sticking around. Coming up next, was the sheriff suffering from sleep deprivation? I'm Vinnie Politan. We continue our investigation of the shooting death of Judge Kevin Mullins. Everything in this case is caught on camera. Everything except why the sheriff did it. Here's the story. In the heart of Whitesburg, Kentucky, a tragic event unfolded on September 19th, 2024 that would forever scar this tight-knit community. District Judge Kevin Mullins, a respected figure known for his commitment to justice, was in his chambers when Letcher County Sheriff Sean Mickey Stines entered. The two men engaged in an argument behind closed doors. Moments later, gunshots echoed through the courthouse. Surveillance video revealed the horrifying scene, but there was no audio. The motive behind this shocking act remains shrouded in mystery, but many wonder if it was connected to the extortion scandal that rocked the same judge's chambers, where the judge's bailiff, Ben Fields, was convicted of extorting female inmates for sex in the chambers. This scandal was also the subject of a civil lawsuit filed against the sheriff, in which he was deposed just days before the fatal shooting. Understanding this case is trying to understand Sheriff Mickey Stines. But if it's someone who's suffering from some sort of a mental breakdown, it can be challenging. But there are other parts of that, which is like, what exactly is going on and what is causing all of this to happen? Now, obviously, you have the deposition, the civil lawsuit, all the pressures there, but what else is going on? How else is it impacting the sheriff? Take a listen to his attorney talking about what was going on in the sheriff's life in the days and time before the shooting.
But I believe that his mental health was impaired to a degree that it impacted his ability to perceive immediacy and, you know, the imminent threat of that, the imminent nature of that threat, Vinnie, as well as the magnitudes. Just a few days prior was this deposition, and I think in the week prior to and the week of the deposition, lots of people noticed that Mickey had become more increasingly paranoid, that he became sleepless, had gone nights without sleep. And there was an overwhelming amount of pressure on him, some internal, but we believe there were external pressures as well. We feel very strongly in our mental health defense, as well as, the evidence, I think, supports our theory of the case, and I believe that we have a strong case to put in front of the jury.
And you heard his attorney there talking about sleepless nights, including, we believe, the night before the shooting, that he's up all night, he's not at home, he's at his aunt's house, but he's not sleeping, he's walking all night long. Which brings us to the next question in our investigation. Was the sheriff suffering from sleep deprivation? And if so, what impact does that have on the mind? When does the lack of sleep become dangerous? And is that what's going on? Is that part of the cause? Joining me, sleep expert, medical director of the North Dakota Center for Sleep and host of the Talking Sleep podcast. You talk about the correct expert for tonight. Dr. Seema Kozlow is with us, and clinical and forensic neuropsychologist, expert in conducting forensic evaluations, and author of the book, The New Rules of Attachment, Dr. Judy Ho. Great to have you both here. Okay, Dr. Kozlow, let me begin with you. When does lack of sleep get dangerous?
Oh, that varies by person. And don't forget, when we talk about sleep deprivation, it's not always hours of sleep. It also reflects the quality of our sleep. So here you're describing someone who has been sleepless and pacing. And does that then worsen his mental health? Probably. And then does that in turn worsen his sleep and make it harder for him to get restful sleep? Most certainly.
Let me ask you, Dr. Judy Ho, that lack of sleep, what does that do to the mind? What does that do to the mind? He's feeling the pressure, but here now, our understanding is he's not sleeping at night. He's pacing, he's anxious, and this is going on day after day, but the night before the shooting, up all night.
Vinnie, sleep deprivation has a multitude of effects. There are neurocognitive effects because it heightens one's amygdala activity. This is the part of your brain that's responsible for processing threats and fear. So that could lead to an exaggerated processing or reaction to fear or fear stimuli. Also, impaired sleep also impairs your prefrontal cortex functioning. This is those higher order functions that we as humans, we pride ourselves on, like planning, like impulse control. When you don't sleep, you have worse impulse control. You have worse emotion regulation. If there are any latent mental health factors, and coupled with external stress, it's going to rise to the fore the longer you don't get quality sleep. And in fact, for people who experience paranoia and psychosis, part of the comprehensive treatment is actually helping them to improve their quality of sleep to reduce the likelihood of psychotic symptoms.
So, Dr. Kozlow, is this I guess I'm looking at a chicken and an egg kind of thing here, right? Like sleeplessness and this behavior, the behavior and the sleeplessness. How does that relationship work from your perspective?
You're exactly right. It is chicken and egg, and it feeds on itself, because the worse the sleep deprivation, the worse the mental health. And as Dr. Ho rightly pointed out, we really need to address the sleep. So what is causing him to be sleepless? Is it all of this anxiety? Does he have an underlying, untreated, undiagnosed sleep disorder that we're not dealing with?
Now, I want to add something else to the mix here. It gets a little more complicated. An attorney representing Mickey Stines brought this up, that he suffers from California encephalitis. This is in the deposition. So when he is under stress, sometimes it causes some issues. It is something that you get from tick bites, basically. We looked it up, WebMD, for what it's worth. California encephalitis may cause personality changes, seizures, weakness, depending on the part of your brain affected. Dr. Judy Ho, you're in California. What are your thoughts?
Well, it sounds like what you're referring to is a form of viral encephalitis. And in some ways, it's almost akin to a traumatic brain injury. So it can cause confusion, episodes of delirium, temporary states of cognitive decline. So it sounds like the attorney is saying there might be an additional factor here. This is something that he's already been dealing with. So on top of everything else that we just discussed and Dr. Kozla pointed out, we also have this that's potentially impacting his cognition, decision, and impulse control.
Let me ask you, Dr. Kozla, the sleep deprivation, in trying to figure out like when it's happening, how it's happening, the sleeplessness, how important would input from his family be and the observations? Like, it's obvious, like when you're not sleeping. This is a guy, though, who is the sheriff, right? So there are going to be times where he's got to be up and ready to go any hour of the day. But is it something generally that people keep to themselves, or is it something that they generally share? Are they honest about what's going on?
It's challenging. Yeah, it's challenging, isn't it? Because if the bed partner is sleeping, they may not be aware that this person is pacing all night. I would be very curious about what his sleep hygiene, what his sleep habits looked like before that deposition. I would be curious about his quality of sleep before that time. Perhaps this was a perfect storm. Perhaps he did have this predetermined, preloaded genetic susceptibility, perhaps. Maybe the encephalitis had part of it. Maybe he had a sleep disorder. And then you add to that this stress. Maybe it was truly the perfect storm for him.
And Dr. Judy Ho, let me ask you one other question here. If he is suffering from some sort of mental problem here, is that something that, while he's incarcerated awaiting trial, can get better on its own? Is this something, like, because I'm trying to understand, he's going to be evaluated for competency, he's going to be evaluated for criminal responsibility, but we've already seen in this arraignment that Ned Pillersdorf said the way he is right here that we're looking at, that's the way he was acting in the deposition as well. He saw a similarity. So I'm wondering, will time do anything here? Or is it something that needs direct treatment, whether it's medicinal or therapeutic?
Good question, Vinny. And if it's a more severe mental health concern, like a type of psychosis episode, it will not likely get better on its own without some type of treatment. So through this trial process, through the mental health evaluations he's clearly going to get, perhaps his attorney is going to be asking for some type of mental health diversion program where he's actually going to get treatment while he's awaiting trial, while he's awaiting sentencing. And of course, post-sentencing, if he does have to serve time, that he is in a condition or in an environment where mental health treatment can be accessed, because that's not absolutely a clear requirement for everyone who is incarcerated. And for somebody who has active psychosis, the treatment, the gold standard treatment, does involve medication therapy, antipsychotic medication, as well as reality testing techniques, which is a behavioral intervention. It's that combination of those two techniques that's really going to help him to get better and to be able to really understand his own state of mind as he reflects back on what happened that day.
Dr. Judy Ho, Dr. Seema Kozla, great to have you both here. Appreciate it. I'm sure we'll be speaking again about this very high-profile case. Still to come, what will the jury think of the judge?
And I think this pressure came crashing down on Mickey, and I think that it was an overwhelming amount of pressure, and I think there was, there was an objective threat to him.
Grieving widow or mastermind behind a murder. Monica Cementelli is accused of plotting to kill her husband.
Famed celebrity hairstylist Fabio Cementelli.
Prosecutors say she and her lover killed Fabio to collect a big life insurance policy.
The defense may say she's a bad woman, but she wouldn't be involved in a murder.
It's a whodunit Hollywood story. But will there be a twist that no one sees?
The Celebrity Stylist Murder Trial. Weekday mornings, only on Court TV.
And I think this pressure came crashing down on Mickey. And I think that it was an overwhelming amount of pressure. And I think there was, there was an objective threat to him based upon what he might say or not say, or might have already said or not said during the deposition. And I think you compound that with the fact that there is a mental health issue as well. And I think that what you see in the chambers in that video is a result of a combination of those factors.
The combination of factors, right? Objective threat, like there was a real threat, like something, he could have said something that really could have put him in danger, but at the same time, he's having these mental issues. This is fascinating because this is the way it's going to play at trial. I mean, these issues are connected to one another. The reality of this sextortion scandal and the civil lawsuit on top of what's happening to him mentally. It's all connected. Take a listen, again, to Jeremy Bartley, his attorney, talking about having the trial in the same county where all this happened, right? And in the same courthouse, I guess, where all this happened. Take a listen.
We believe that Letcher County is the appropriate venue. We think that, we think that that's a jury of our client's peers. We believe that the same people that elected him to be sheriff should sit on this case. You won't find any better people in terms of people supporting one another, being cordial with one another, and everyone knows everyone.
Everyone knows everyone, which means everyone would know Mickey Stines, the sheriff, and everyone would know the judge as well, which brings us to the next question in our investigation. What will the jury think of the judge, the victim in the case? Like the underlying sextortion scandal that's taking place in the civil deposition, everything else, is part of the mental health defense, which means there's going to be some discussion about the victim, the judge in this. Joining me, the attorney representing the woman suing Sheriff Stines, Ned Pillersdorf, and the host of Hillbilly Crime on YouTube, closely following this case from the beginning, Elizabeth Jones is with us. Elizabeth, let me begin with you. Like, is there a current reputation for the victim in this case?
Well, there have been a whole lot of accusations and talk going on prior to this happening. And people don't just know Mickey and the judge. They know all the higher ups up there. And so I think depending on what Mickey's defense attorney brings out in trial, I think that's going to be the telltale, outcome of what this trial is going to be. I have myself seen a very explicit video of someone who Sabrina would call a higher up. So I know they're out there.
Wow. Ned, you're involved in this civil suit. Was there, and the victim is the judge. So if you're talking about an objective threat and everything else and how it would manifest itself in the shooting and killing of the judge is going to come up, right? In your case, any evidence that the judge is involved or knows that this stuff is happening in his chambers?
No direct evidence, except for the fact that it was the judge's bailiff extorting these women, and at least 2 of the sexual encounters occur in his chambers. Having said that, Vinny, this trial is not going to happen in Letcher County. I'm willing to bet anyone there's going to be a change of venue. Kentucky has a statute that says the Commonwealth can ask for and get a change of venue. And I think Mr. Bartley's comment that everybody knows everybody, that's the kind of comment that gets you a change of venue. If Stines goes on trial, it won't be in Letcher County. I know Stines wants it tried there, but reality, it's not going to happen.
So let me ask you, Elizabeth, just generally, and it's not a scientific poll or anything else, but you've been talking about this on your channel. A lot of the local folks are watching you on YouTube talk about this. They're posting their comments. Do you get an overall sense? Is there a sense of sympathy, not for the victim, but for Mickey Stines versus the judge? Or is it more sympathy to the judge versus Mickey Stines? How do you see that balance? I know it's unscientific, but you're there interacting with these folks all the time. What is your gut telling you?
I think there's a whole lot more sympathy towards Mickey. One thing that I noticed in that deposition was when Mickey started to answer the questions, he then took a break with Daniel Dotson, the lawyer, and then he came back, and every question after that was, I don't recall, I don't recall, I don't recall. And, you know, the people of this county have read those depositions too, you know, so I think people are starting to, well, from the very beginning, they've been more behind Mickey. But I think people are starting to see all of this ugliness that has been taking place in Letcher County over so many decades come to the surface.
Ned, and I think you're right there, Ned, if folks are reading the civil depositions, they're not going to make it on the jury, those folks, but, you know, there's others that haven't read it. Ned, do you think there is, with your civil suit, do you feel like you are just scratching the surface of the involvement of folks, or do you think that it is what it is? It's the deputy and you know, a bad apple.
You know, there's two reasons why you file this type of civil suit. First, to help the people in front of you, Miss Atkins and the late Jennifer Hill. The other is the reality of Kentucky courts. We have this proliferation of women in custody, and we try to get them out on ankle bracelets. And those women are so easily subject to sextortion. They know that a simple phone call from the ankle bracelet person to the judge, they're back in jail. These women know if they say that's not true, they probably won't be believed. So one of the reasons we filed the lawsuit was not only to help the people in front of us, but
got to change the system.
This is not the only place it's happening.
Got to change the system.
About these other women. It's all over the country.
Yep.
Women are being if you walk into an
re-victimized
room today, Vinnie, you'll
Ned,
see women.
We're out of time again. I hate cutting off Ned, but I have to do it. We're out of time. Ned Pillersdorf, Elizabeth Jones, thank you both so much. You know, this trial will obviously be about Sheriff Mickey Stines and his state of mind, but to understand what was going on inside the sheriff's mind, the jury's going to have to hear about what was happening inside the judge's chambers, and if they believe the judge is involved, the sheriff could get the benefit of the doubt. I'm Vinnie Politan. We'll keep digging for answers as the investigation continues.